Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at the book of Exodus, chapter 36 specifically, and we're going to be looking at the building of the tabernacle now. You might think you know this story. It's a pretty familiar one, right? But trust me, there are some really surprising lessons here about generosity, resource management, and leadership that are just as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago.
Yeah, and I think what's often overlooked is the sheer scale of this project. Imagine the Israelites just newly free from generations of slavery, being tasked with constructing a portable temple, this tangible symbol of their covenant with God. It's a massive undertaking, demanding incredible resources, skill, and a whole lot of faith.
And they didn't just rise to the occasion, they surpassed it. The text describes this daily outpouring of donations. Free will offerings brought every morning. You have to wonder, what was going through their minds as they're lining up? Day after day, eager to contribute. Were they just caught up in the excitement, the collective spirit of rebuilding? Or was there something deeper? Was there a deeper understanding of what they were doing, the sacrifice that they were making?
It's a fascinating question, and it's one that I think speaks to the very heart of generosity. Was it purely emotional, driven by that relief of freedom, desire to please? Or was there a more, a calculated element to it, a recognition of the need to invest in their future, their shared identity as a people?
And this is where it gets really interesting, because their generosity, while admirable, results in a very unexpected problem, a surplus of resources. They have given much more than enough, too much even. Talk about a good problem to have, right?
Not necessarily. This surplus, it presents a very unique challenge, both logistically and symbolically, on a practical level. Managing and transporting this excess would be a nightmare, especially for a nomadic people. But on a deeper level, it forces us to consider the nature of giving itself. Is there a point where abundance, even in generosity, becomes counterproductive?
And that's where Moses steps in, right? And his response is fascinating. He halts further donations. Can you imagine having to tell people that, thank you, but no more, please? It seems so counterintuitive, especially in the midst of all this enthusiasm.
It's a bold leadership move, and it reveals, I think, a very deep understanding of human nature. Moses recognizes that. Unchecked abundance, even in a spiritual context, can lead to complacency waste, even a sense of entitlement. He's essentially drawing a line in the sand, reminding the Israelites that their true offering lies not just in the quantity of their gifts, but in the spirit behind them.
It makes you wonder how the people reacted to this. Did they understand? Or were some of them disappointed, even offended by the halt in donations? What do you think? For someone who had been consistently giving every day, maybe even giving until it hurt a little bit, to suddenly be told enough is enough.
It's easy to imagine a range of emotions, confusion, perhaps even a sense of rejection. After all, they were simply following the call to give generously. And this is where the true test of faith comes in, trusting that sometimes obedience requires restraint, even when it comes to our most heartfelt impulses.
And that's a really powerful concept, isn't it? The idea that sometimes saying enough is just as important, if not more important, than continually giving more. It's about recognizing that true generosity isn't always about quantity, but about discernment. It's about aligning our actions with a deeper understanding of what's truly needed. It really is a perspective shift. We're just so used to associating generosity with abundance, with giving as much as we can. But what if? What if sometimes the more generous act is knowing when to stop?
Precisely. It challenges us to kind of redefine generosity, not just as this outpouring, but also as this measured act of discernment. Think about it. Even in our own modern lives, we encounter situations where too much of a good thing can be detrimental.
Right. It's like that old saying, too many cooks in the kitchen. You can have all the best intentions, the most talented people, but without that clear direction and a shared understanding of limits, the whole thing can fall apart.
Exactly. And this brings us, I think, to another fascinating aspect of this whole tabernacle story. The incredible attention to detail, the craftsmanship that was involved. Exodus 36 goes into great detail about the materials, the measurements. It wasn't just about throwing resources at this project. It was about this carefully orchestrated process, this real balance between divine inspiration and human skill.
We see that emphasis on precision, the curtains, the boards, the bars, even the loops and the clasps, everything meticulously designed and assembled. You get the sense that this wasn't just about building a structure. It was about creating something worthy, something that reflected the sacredness of their covenant with God.
And this meticulousness speaks to, I think, another really important aspect of generosity, intentionality. It's not enough to simply give. We have to consider how our gifts are being used. How are they contributing to the greater good?
So we have this fascinating juxtaposition here, overwhelming generosity, leading to this surplus of resources, and then this incredible attention to detail, this almost surgical precision in the actual construction process. It's like two sides of the same coin.
Absolutely. And connecting these two seemingly disparate elements reveals, I think, a really profound truth. True generosity lies in finding that balance between abundance and restraint, between heartfelt giving and thoughtful execution. It's about recognizing that even the most noble endeavors require careful stewardship, a willingness to ask, not just how much can we give, but what is the most effective, the most impactful way to use what we have.
And that takes us beyond, just donating materials or money. It speaks to a much broader approach to generosity, one that encompasses our time, our talents, our energy. It's about recognizing that sometimes the most generous thing we can do is to hold back, to delegate, to trust others to do their part.
And that requires a certain level of humility, don't you think? A willingness to relinquish control, to acknowledge that we might not always have the answers or the capacity to do it all ourselves.
Which can be tough.
Especially
to see for those of us who are inclined to just jump in and help, to give until we have nothing left. But you're saying that sometimes that very impulse, that drive to do more, can actually be a hindrance, both to ourselves and to the causes that we care about.
Yeah. It's about learning to recognize the difference between genuine need and our own need, to feel useful, to be the hero of the story. It's about stepping back and asking ourselves, what is the most sustainable, the most impactful way for me to contribute in this moment? And sometimes the answer might be to simply step aside, to create space for others to step up.
That takes a certain level of self-awareness, to be able to honestly assess our own motivations and our own capacity, and then to act accordingly. It's not always easy, but it's such a crucial part of being a responsible and effective giver. It is a humbling thought to realize that sometimes. Holding back can be just as powerful, maybe even more powerful than giving more. It reminds me of that saying, it's better to light one small candle than to curse the darkness. It's not about the size of our actions, but about their focus, their timing, and their alignment with a greater purpose.
Exactly. And it's in those moments of deliberate restraint. In choosing the path of, thoughtful stewardship over just unrestrained giving. That we discover, I think, a much deeper connection to the very act of generosity itself. It becomes less about proving ourselves, less about ego, and more about this genuine desire to contribute to something larger than ourselves.
And that takes us back to the Israelites, standing there before this magnificent tabernacle, this tangible symbol of their collective effort, their carefully measured generosity. I imagine there must have been such a profound sense of satisfaction in that moment, just this recognition that their individual sacrifices, their willingness to give, had contributed to something truly awe-inspiring.
Absolutely. And that sense of shared accomplishment, that collective pride, it was likely amplified by the fact that, their generosity hadn't been squandered. It hadn't been wasted through excess.
Well, mismanaging.
Imagine the stories they must have told, the lessons passed down through generations about the importance of giving wisely, of finding that delicate balance between enthusiasm and instruction.
It makes you wonder how those lessons might translate to our lives today. We've talked about, material resources, time, energy, but what about other forms of generosity, like forgiveness, for example, or patience, or simply offering a listening ear to someone in need? Can we apply this concept of, enough is enough to those aspects of our lives as well?
Absolutely. Think about a time when you offered forgiveness too easily, too quickly, without really allowing for true accountability or healing to take place. Or a time when your patience, while well-intentioned, actually enabled someone else's harmful behavior. I think even in these, intangible realms, there is a certain wisdom in recognizing when enough is enough, when setting those boundaries. It's actually the more generous, the more loving act.
It's a fascinating concept to grapple with, this idea that true generosity isn't always about giving more, but about giving wisely, about finding that sweet spot between our desire to help and a deeper understanding of what's truly needed.
It is. It's a lifelong practice. It's this constant process of discernment, of checking our motivations, of asking ourselves, am I giving from a place of genuine love and compassion? Or am I trying to fill a void within myself?
It's a question worth pondering as we navigate a world that's often defined by excess, by this relentless pursuit of more. Perhaps this ancient story of the Tabernacle offers us a timely reminder that true fulfillment, both individually and collectively, lies in finding that balance, that place where enough truly is enough.
Yes, and as you move through your own life, your own experiences, of giving and receiving, consider those moments where you're confronted with that question of how much is enough.
Yeah.
May this deep dive into Exodus 36 serve as a source of inspiration, encouraging you to embrace the truly transformative power of measured generosity, of finding that sweet spot where heartfelt giving meets thoughtful restraint.
Such a beautiful thought to end on, reminding us that sometimes the most profound lessons are hidden in the most unexpected places. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking those aha moments that remind us of the beauty and the complexity of this human experience.
Thank you for spending this time with us. Toby, Eleanor, and our team of researchers are working hard to produce more episodes. If you value what we're doing here, please consider subscribing and sharing the word. Additionally, our podcast, RSS, and Patreon links can be found below. Listener support is what makes our work possible. Join us next time for another deep dive. God bless.